Hello, campers, and welcome to week one of the Met Opera Global Summer Camp. We have got opera lovers from all 7 continents joining us for this Global Summer Camp. I'm Susan Blackwell, one of your Met Opera Camp counselors. It's so nice to meet you. This week's opera is Humperdinck's Hansel and Gretel, and between Wednesday and Friday, you can watch the entire opera from a link on the main summer camp website. And now here's a little taste of this week's schedule. Today, get to know the opera with the awesome Tim Brendler. Tomorrow, that's Tuesday, we're going to be making a special treat with a special guest. In your welcome email and also in the Google Classroom, there's a list of ingredients you'll need if you want to bake along with us. On Wednesday, the Met's executive stage director, Paula Swazi, will be hosting an artist chat with Irish soprano Tara Airot, who recently played Hansel in the Met's production of Hansel and Gretel. On Thursday, we've got opera story time with star soprano Christine Gerke, and I'll be in the career corner with the Met Opera general manager, Peter Gelb. Also on Wednesday and Thursday, we've got Zoom check-ins with Camp Counselor Tim Brendler, and on Friday, it's Camper Showcase, hosted by Dan Marshall, where we get to see all the great things you've been making all week long. On Google Classroom, you can also find Miss B's art project, musical motifs, and warm-ups with Ms. Berglund. And remember, almost all of these camp activities are live, so we want to hear from you. We want to know what questions you have, and we all want to learn from each other. And now, all the way from Texas, let's give a warm Met Summer Camp welcome to Tim Brendler.
Hello, friends, and happy holidays from the Metropolitan Opera. We are so glad you are joining us from all over the world, and this is going to be such an exciting week we have to kick off. I was so excited last night that I barely slept. You would think that I actually think that today is Christmas. And so you actually might be thinking, who is this crazy guy, and why is he wearing this Santa hat? So my name is Tim, and I am your week 1 camp counselor for Hansel and Gretel. And the reason I'm wearing a Santa hat and you see a Christmas tree next to me is that oftentimes this opera is actually performed at the Met during the holidays, and also other productions or other companies all over the world do the same thing. And it's really interesting to think about that when this first premiered, the first time it was ever performed was actually on the eve of Christmas Eve, December 23rd, all the way back to 1893. So friends, we have so much to cover this morning. I'm so excited you're here. I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to bring us over to another app that is called Menti. And so Dan, I think, is going to help me share that screen. And what I'm going to have you do is either on your phone or your computer, I just want you to go to any internet browser, and I want you to go to www.menti.com, and you're going to type in the code 870659. And if you forget that code, just look up at the screen. On every slide here, you will see at the very top. So anyone who's joining us at any time, you can go to menti.com and use that code 870659. I feel like we're on a telethon right now. And this, friends, for those of us who are coming onto this a little bit later, this will always be active throughout the week. So for those of us joining right now, I would love for us to go to www.menti.com and use that code 870659. And I see already we're really jumping onto this. This is so exciting. You can see on the bottom right-hand side of your screen, you can see our friends from all over the world are submitting their answers right now, and it keeps going up very quickly. So this is an app that we're going to be using to play a couple games this morning. And so as you see on your screen, I just want you to tell me how you're feeling today. You can choose one or many different answers, and then you can hit submit. And sort of watch the screen. I think personally, I'm a little bit of all of these things. Maybe not too cold. It is very warm with my Santa hat on right now. But I am just so thrilled. It's so exciting to see. Look at all these. We have over 100 friends that are joining us right now, which is really exciting. And you can see this keeps changing. And so this is an app that we're going to be using throughout our time this week, every now and then. So if you want to come in, see me on the check-in, this is also a similar game that we're going to be playing together later on. So again, just a reminder to any of our friends who are joining later on, if you're watching this stream after it's live, you can always go back, see this, and participate whenever you're able to have a chance. So I know that there's still a couple more people entering, but I'm going to keep going ahead. I am thrilled to see that so many of our friends are happy and excited and ready to party. There's actually also a lot of people who are hungry, too. Stay tuned. Tomorrow, we're going to do a really special treat that we're going to get to cook with. So I'm going to advance. You can always keep coming back to this later. It'll stay live all week. But the next thing I want to do is I want us to play a game of mythbusters. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read a number of different prompts, and they're all going to be either true or false. All you're going to do is click either yes, you think that's true, or no, you think that's false. So here we go. Just a few things about opera in general. First of all, do you think it's true or false that everything is sung without amplification, meaning no microphones? It's a really big hall. As you can see, the picture behind that is actually the facade or the front of the Met's house. It's a really, really big hall that seats thousands of people. Do you think that, yes, they do not sing with amplification, or no, they have to be using microphones to reach that many people? It's interesting here. We sort of have, it's almost neck and neck there. And as we go through each of these, for any of our friends who are joining the live stream right now, you can see at the very, very top of that, the menti.com, you can use that code to hop on at any time. So now, friends, I'll give you a little, each time we go through these, I'm going to tell you what the answer is. And so for this one, this is actually true. Everyone who sings at the Metropolitan Opera on stage actually sing without any amplification. There's not a single person that's wearing a microphone, which is, I think, is just really exciting. And once you're able to see an opera live, it's really stunning. All right, here's our next one. Stories are never retold through opera. Do you think yes, that is true, or no, that is false? Are stories retold through opera? Yes, they are retold, or no, they're never told again in opera. And this is something that I think might surprise you, because a lot of times we might think of opera as something that is not always something that's relatable or maybe material that we don't know of. But I think the really interesting part of this is that this one is actually false. Stories are constantly being retold on the opera stage, and you may have seen or heard the story before in another form. And a fairy tale, such as our opera Hansel and Gretel this week, is an example of that, a story that has already existed that comes to life on the opera stage. And so other operas are sometimes based on novels or plays or biographies or even movies. So a really exciting thing that we have in Hansel and Gretel. Here's our next one. Operas are similar to action movies. You will always see every single part of the plot on stage. Do you think that's true, or do you think that's false? Just like an action movie, we're going to see all the things, all the action at all times. Do you think that's true, or do you think that's false? And this is something that's a little bit tricky, especially when especially if you're very new to opera. Something to keep in mind as you're watching this is you'll often hear us say, be sure that you know the plot, which is the storyline. And oftentimes people will say, have you read the synopsis? And the synopsis is what provides us information about the story. And this one is actually false. You probably won't see everything, even every event, solely through the text of what is sung and sometimes spoken on stage. So this is why it's really important to read the plot synopsis beforehand so you don't miss any part of the story. Sometimes a librettist will assume certain things, such as a background or a backdrop to the story's setting before the curtain even rises. Here's our next one. Every character will talk about how they feel before, during, and after they do something. So this is actually one of my favorite things about opera. This and the next one as well. Opera is all about emotions. And so if actually also you see behind there, this is actually a sneak peek inside. This is a picture of the inside of the Metropolitan Opera with the orchestra pit where the orchestra players play on the bottom there. And you see many, many levels where different people sit. And so the answer to this one is true. Most of the time this is true. Sometimes that's not always true, so it can be really true or false. But I think for the most part, characters love to talk about how they feel, oftentimes before they do it, when they're doing it, and then again they reflect on it. So lots of feelings, lots of emotions. Characters are constantly telling us how they're feeling and interacting with situations. But those of you that said false, there's also times when that's not this case. So both of those, you could be true or false. Here's the next one. A character's feeling or words will never be repeated or discussed more than once. Do you think a character who sings in opera will only ever say it one time, or do you think they're going to say it a lot of times? For this slide, I gave you a picture of what it might look like from the point of view of one of our singers at the Met on stage, which I think is a really fun way to look out. And you can see thousands of people that fill that hall, and you can see the maestro who conducts on the center there. So the answer to this one is false. You'd think that the characters really like to hear themselves talk. And oftentimes, everything that a character will sing or say will many times be repeated or discussed by other characters on stage. So here's our last one for this game, and we're going to play a different game after this. Women only play women and girls, and men only play men and boy roles. Do you think that's true, or do you think that's false? And this is something that I think is actually very shocking and surprising, especially when we talk about this production. I tried to trick you, but clearly I was not able to. So bravi to all of you who said false. False is the correct answer. In fact, this particular opera production, Hansel and Gretel, that we're going to be studying and watching this week, has two characters that are played by opera stars of a gender that is opposite their characters. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later today. So here is the next game we're going to play. We're going to play a little bit of what I call philosophical chairs, which I'm going to say a statement. You'll see a statement on the screen, and I just want you to agree or disagree with that statement. And then we'll talk a little bit about that. So here's the first one. Parents never make mistakes. Do you agree or disagree with that? Parents never make mistakes. Uh-oh, sorry, parents. We have an overwhelming response fairly quickly. And I think we're all human and we all make mistakes. But in this production especially, Hansel and Gretel's mother sends them out to the forest, and that's sort of a really big mistake, because when father finds out that mom sent the kids out into the forest, he's very concerned, and that was a very big mistake that mom and dad made, well, at least mom in this case. But here is our next statement that I have for you. Parents should make their kids do chores. You think, yeah, that's a good thing for kids to do, or do you think, no, I'm a kid, let me be a kid, I shouldn't have to do chores? And I think this will be really interesting to see what we all think about this one. But something that I think is really interesting, at the beginning of this opera, Hansel and Gretel are supposed to be doing their chores, but unfortunately, they're sort of monkeying around and actually dancing, which later on, we're going to learn a little bit of a really fun dance that I'll talk about. So at the very beginning of this opera, you're going to see Hansel and Gretel are supposed to be doing their chores, and that's why mom's pretty upset. Here's our next statement. You should look after your younger siblings. Yes, you agree with that, or no, you disagree. I don't have any younger siblings per se, except for I am a younger sibling to my sister. And something that I really appreciated is that she oftentimes looked after me and made sure that I was always doing all right. And this is something that I think is going to be really evident in Hansel and Gretel. You're going to see Hansel and Gretel, the relationship that the two have on stage is really a lot of fun. And you can really tell that the way that Alice and Christine play Hansel and Gretel, they really show a deep care and affection for each other. And I think that'll be readily present on screen. Here's our next one. You can never love food too much. And this is actually from our production, that big chocolate cake behind there. And this production is a lot about food. Food plays a really important part in this opera. And something that you'll actually see a little bit later, maybe in some of the other pictures, you'll see a number of different kitchens. In each act of the opera, there's a different kitchen that we see. And food and hunger plays a really, really big part of the backdrop of this story. At the very beginning, we're going to see Hansel and Gretel are very hungry. And later on, we're going to also see that they are on a full buffet in their dream, and then they just pig out on the last act, which I think you're really going to enjoy. Here's our next one. Dreams are real. I'm really interested to think of what you think about this one. Dreams are real. When you dream something at night, do you think that that, at least in some part, is reality? When your mind is probably going a mile a minute in your sleep and you're having all these fancy dreams, do you think that those dreams are real, or at least part of those maybe be real, that maybe what you dream about has an effect on maybe what you're just going through at the time? And so I included this one because there's a really neat dream sequence that Hansel and Gretel are going to go through as they dream. And you can see there are going to be 14 angels on stage, and the angels don't necessarily look like angels that we're used to seeing. Here's the next one. Good will always win over evil. Do you think that's true or no? And a lot of times, think of a lot of different stories that maybe you heard as a kid. In a lot of those stories, did good always win over evil? But also think of this maybe in modern days. Do you think in real life, will good always prevail over evil? I certainly hope so. That's certainly a hope and dream that I have, that good will always win over evil. But in this particular opera, this is going to be a really big part of the very ending that's going to be really exciting, that I think you're really going to love. And here we go. Here's our last one. There is something to be thankful for every day. And as you can see behind me, I just think that's the most fun, just a riotous picture of Alice and Christine chowing down into that chocolate cake. And I think if we were to ask them, I think they would say that there is something to be thankful for every day, and something that I think you'll see very present throughout this opera as well. And so any of our friends, again, friends who are watching this later on, you can tell your friends that don't worry, we did this really cool activity, but it is still going to be live. So all of our friends who are watching this later, you can tell them that this is going to be available all week and throughout the summer for you to log on later and also keep going. And so now I'm actually going to bring us back up to a PowerPoint that I have, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about the opera itself. So again, for those of you who are just joining us, my name is Tim, as Dan has introduced me to, as well as our fabulous host, our other camp counselor, Susan, who you'll meet throughout this week. Please, you can call me Tim. You don't have to call me Mr. Brendler. Some of my students like to call me Timmy B, whatever you'd like. So let's let our hair down this summer. This isn't school. This is summer camp. So during the school year, I teach music at a secondary or high school in the great state of Texas. A little bit of background information that I want to share with you. I don't think we could have picked a more fun opera to jumpstart the first ever Met Opera Global Summer Camp. So welcome, friends. There's so much to talk about, and I'm only going to be able to scratch the surface here. But you'll see on the screen, there's a little bit of background information. You might see that first thing, 3 acts, and think, oh my goodness, that is so long. But really, this opera in particular is only an hour and 42 minutes, which is actually shorter than a lot of movies. Since these operas are recorded, you can always watch one act, pause it, do an activity, have lunch, and then come back for another act later. And those are going to be available on Wednesday, and we'll remind you of that throughout the week. There are many different types of opera. Hansel and Gretel is what we consider a folk opera, an opera that is based on, in this case, a folk tale or story that many people would have known at the time of the opera's composition. And finally, many operas are sung in different languages. For instance, Hansel and Gretel was actually originally written in German, but this production is in English. Engelbert Humperdinck, with that fabulous mustache you see on him, he is the composer of the opera. He's the person who wrote the music. Adelheid Wette is actually the composer's sister. She's the one who we refer to as the librettist. The librettist is the person who writes all the text of the opera. So even though this was a story that previously existed, Adelheid Wette, she had to write the words so that they were more easily understood when you're singing them. And this one, someone else, in this production, there's another man who, Sir David Pountney, who has translated the text for us. And so, friends, you're really going to love this cast. I want to sort of introduce them one by one. Hansel, surprising as it may be, is what we call a trouser role. A young male character that's actually sung by a woman. In this case, the stunning English-born mezzo-soprano Alice Coote, who made her Met debut in 2006. Gretel is played by Christine Schaefer, the incomparable or matchless or amazing German-born soprano who made her Met debut in 2002. And when I say debut, that's the first time that they stepped foot on the stage of the Met. The witch, who is an evil, ugly, nasty woman, is actually played by a man. In this case, the hilariously entertaining English-born tenor Philip Langridge, who made his debut in 1985 in Così fan tutte, a production that we'll learn about last week of camp this summer with my very, very dear friend Emily. The next character that we're going to see is Gertrude, who's the mother and wife. And she's played by English-born mezzo-soprano Rosalind Plowright, who made her Met debut in 2003 in Janufa, a Czech opera about a tangled set of village relationships. And the children's father and Gertrude's husband, whose name is Peter, is played by the American bass baritone Alan Held, who made his Met debut in 1989. The conductor of the production, who keeps everyone together, is the Russian-born superstar conductor Vladimir Yurovsky, and he's a really big deal. Back then and even today, he's still a really, really well-known conductor. So now I want to dive into the story, one that might be really familiar to many of us, but completely new to some others. So here's a little bit of the story. Act 1. Hansel and Gretel are home alone, left to do chores. Both are bored and hungry, and to cheer themselves up, they start to dance. Their games are interrupted by their mother, who's angry to find them playing instead of working. In her anger, the milk jug is knocked over, losing what was supposed to be supper. The mother sends Hansel and Gretel into the forest to gather strawberries instead. Their father stumbles home. The mother is irritated but calms down when he produces a big sack of food. And when he asks about Hansel and Gretel, the father is very surprised to hear they're in the forest. Horrified, he tells his wife that the children are in danger because of the witch who lives there. They rush off into the woods to look for them. Act 2. Hansel and Gretel happily gather and eat strawberries, but when night falls, they realize they are lost and become very scared. The Sandman appears and calms them by sprinkling sand on their eyes, putting the children to sleep. They say their evening prayers and go to sleep, and in the dream they see 14 angels protecting them. Act 3. At dawn, the Dew Fairy comes to wake Hansel and Gretel. They are excited to see a house not too far away. Suddenly, the witch appears and captures them by casting a spell on Hansel to fatten him up so she can eat him. But with a spark of wit and hope, Gretel breaks the spell, freeing Hansel. When the witch asks Gretel to look in the oven, Gretel pretends she doesn't know how. And as the witch shows Gretel, the children shove her inside and shut the door. The oven explodes, and the many gingerbread children the witch had enchanted come back to life. Their parents appear, and the family is reunited, and everyone gives thanks for being freed. So that's the whole story. Now, throughout this week, there are 10 different activities which I've designed for us to have a lot of fun with as we dive into many of the different themes in this opera. And there's really something for everyone. Those of you who like to write, those who like to perform or design or play games, or maybe all of those apply to you, which is really awesome. While I encourage you to try as many of these activities, you don't have to do all of them. So I'm going to walk you through a description of each of the activities, and don't stress out. If you don't catch anything, remember each of these activities and the instructions can be found on our Google Classroom page with further website links and resources. And I'll remind you, throughout the week, we're going to be asking a number of you to share your work at Friday's Camper Showcase. So this first thing that I want to talk to you about is one of my favorite activities that we're going to do, a folk-style dance that we're going to learn together for a virtual folk dance. Towards the beginning of Act 1, Gretel teaches Hansel how to dance, telling him, "Dancing breaks the gremlin's spell." And I've uploaded a teaching video to Google Classroom for you to learn all about the dance. So you're going to grab a partner, someone at home. You're going to learn it together, and you can teach your other family members. You're going to record it and upload it to Google Classroom for us to include it in a virtual folk dance showcase. And a big bonus here if your entire family is in the recording doing the folk dance together. And if we have time later, after our questions, maybe we'll learn a little bit of that dance to get us jumping around. The next thing you see on the screen are two gentlemen who are the Grimm brothers, Jacob and Wilhelm, who they heard Hansel and Gretel. They heard that story from a friend who shared the story in their first book that they produced back in 1812. The brothers collected all sorts of different stories they heard from their friends and neighbors, all in hopes of saving them for everyone else to read. And that last part, to save them, really sticks out to me, and that's exactly what we're going to do with this activity. If you wrote a fairy tale, what would it sound like? How would it end? I want some of you to write a modern-day fairy tale and record yourself reading it. And bonus points if you get your whole family to act it out as someone reads your modern-day fairy tale. This next one, you don't need to synchronize dive, but this is a fun picture that can sort of say a little bit about this. In a paired performance, I've offered a couple different texts from the opera, and I like, if you want to, you can translate it into your own words. And the paired performance is when someone reads the first box from the text of the opera, and then you read your translation, and you go back and forth. And I think it's really, really neat creative. It sounds a little funny without looking at the paper, but I think once you see it on Google Classroom, it'll make a little bit more sense. And I'm sure you've seen many trailers before. Maybe you've even seen the trailer for Hansel and Gretel, which I think we might play a little bit later again, for short advertisements that try to get you to watch a movie or a show. And I'm sure you've seen lots of different trailers throughout your life already. So for this activity, I want you, now that you know a little bit about the opera, and once you watch it, I want you to think of what a trailer would look like. So if the Met staff asked you, hey, we need a new trailer for this opera, what would that look like? And you can upload that to Google Classroom, and you never know, that might be the new trailer that is used by the Met. Record a folk song. There's a couple activities that are on Google Classroom that are about folk songs. Folk songs are those that come from specific parts of the world and have been passed down from one person to another over a really long time. So ask yourself, what songs do you remember singing as a child? Were there specific songs that my parents sung to me, or maybe that I sung to my younger siblings? If you're having trouble remembering, you can always ask your parents. They might be able to help you remember some of those. So I want you to explore your own folklore, your own upbringing, and then maybe think about recording and uploading a performance of one of your favorites. The costume closet. This is one of my favorites that I've included a special example on Google Classroom for you. This production is full of really neat costumes, and this is a rendering, a sketch of a costume by the designer John McFarlane. This is his tree costume for this opera. And so for this activity, I want you to choose a character and create a new costume, only sharing the clothes, fabrics, and other materials that are available around your house. And then, my favorite part, hit the runway. I want you to record and share a 90-second video showcasing your newly created costume for one of the characters in Hansel and Gretel. Goose Chase, my students really love this. I try to do these a couple times throughout the year, and anytime we go on a trip, I always make one. Goose Chase is an app-based photo scavenger hunt, and this is one of the activities that you would have to have either an Android or an iOS phone in order to play the app. This is the only one that requires a specific app to play it. There are instructions on Google Classroom for how to download the app, to log in. There are codes, class codes, as well as a password. There's a whole list of them under that part on Google Classroom. So you can upload your submissions, and each time you submit a photo, part of your photo scavenger hunt, you're going to receive a number of points. It's really fun, and I hope many of you will play. The first time I saw this opera, I immediately thought of the board game Candyland, which some of you may have even played yourselves. On Google Classroom, I have created and uploaded a printable board game for you to color in. And here's an example of what mine looked like when I colored it in. Since I printed mine on regular printing paper, you don't need anything special. I use dimes or any type of small change or currency as players, but you can always use whatever you find around your house. You can print out the card games and color them to match the game board. There are plain ones if you'd like to draw in the circles or just color the circles in, as well as characters that you can color in too, or you can color around them. So here's a basic version of what mine look like. So I colored those in, and then I cut them all out, and that's what helps us actually move on the game board. And here's another way you can color around the characters if you choose. So whatever you'd like. So after you color them, you would cut them out, use the cards to advance your player. This meaning if you drew a blue card, you would advance to the next blue square on your game board. And one other thing, I've included a number of other game cards that you can print off, cut, and include in your game deck. Depending on what the card says, they will either advance your player, make them go back, or lose a turn. And as you can see there, they all refer back to the plot, the synopsis, the story of Hansel and Gretel. And if you'd like to create your own, I've also included on Google Classroom a blank sheet for you to write in on. This next is another big game, and who doesn't love Jeopardy? I've uploaded a game for you to play with your whole family after you've learned a little bit more and watched the opera. Each of the answers in Jeopardy style are given in the form of a answer, and then you need to provide the question. So for instance, if the clue were younger brother, who is played by Alice Coote, you would answer, who is Hansel? So have fun with this favorite. It's a family fun game night. I think you'll really enjoy that. And that works on any computer, but it works best in PowerPoint. Parents, especially if you have PowerPoint, that is most helpful. After you've watched the opera that starts airing Wednesday afternoon, I want you to record a review. What did you think? What were your favorite parts? Who were your favorite opera stars and why? What did you think of the orchestra? What did you think of the staging, the costumes, the set design? There are so many pieces that combine to make this a really stunning production. And think about, did anything surprise you? So record a 90-second critique and share that with us. So again, there are lots of different activities available. I encourage you to try a lot of them, as many as you want. And none of these activities are mandatory, but I promise you'll have so much fun with all of these activities. In addition to Google Classroom, some of the materials you might see say post here on Google Classroom or on Flipgrid. Flipgrid is something you can use on your phone or on your computer and record and add stickers and filters and emojis. It's really, really fun. And the costume closet activity, that and the critic activity, I have uploaded videos that I use using Flipgrid. So if you have questions about those, don't hesitate to reach out. We talked a little about this earlier. On Friday, we're going to showcase a number of your work from the activities. So be sure to complete and upload them a little bit early so that we can include them in your presentation as well. We really would love as much time that we can to make sure that we present as many different creations as possible. And again, like Susan said earlier, she gives a little bit of a quick overview. This you can also see on our Google Classroom page. You can view it and take a picture of it. What I love about this that I created is that it is color-coded. So for us, all of us in the younger cohort that are listening now, you will see the green always applies to you. The blue is going to refer to the older kids in camp. And then the yellow is when for everyone comes in together. And so tomorrow, you heard something a lot about cooking and baking. And so I want to touch base on that a little bit before we take questions and maybe have some time to look at a couple other things. So tomorrow's special guest, friends, we have such a phenomenally, I'm so excited about this, really. Before I reveal who it is, I want to play one of my favorite guessing games, which is many, some, few, and none. So I'm going to read a statement, and I want you to guess if you or your parents might know an opera singer or maybe a character, who you think it might be. As I read the statement, feel free to jot it in the comments and think of who you think the guest star might be. So here we go. Here's the first one. Many people can say, I love to bake and sing high notes. Me too, and really, who doesn't? And perhaps maybe at the same time. So that could apply to all of us, really. Some people would say, I began performing when I was 11, and since then I've performed on Broadway and many of the world's greatest opera stages. That could be a number of different opera stars, but not too many have also sung on Broadway. Few can say, I've been nominated for a Grammy Award, which here in the United States, that is a very, very special award that is given to only the best musicians. And it's a tremendous honor just to be nominated for one. And no one else can say, last season, I performed in the title role of a new production at the Met, simultaneously juggling and singing music composed by Philip Glass. So yes, my friends, that would be Anthony Roth Costanzo, who performed this past season in the Met's new production of Akhenaten. So join us tomorrow at 12 noon Eastern Time, where we'll be cooking with our countertenor superstar, Anthony Roth Costanzo. In preparation for tomorrow, friends, you'll want to check your kitchen, maybe run out to the store if you want to participate live with this hands-on activity. But don't worry, these are always going to be recorded live, and then we archive them so you can go back and watch them later. So if you want to gather your stuff and do the cooking activity later in the week, you can always do that too. So cooking with a countertenor, we'll learn a little bit more of what that is. You will have so much fun with Anthony tomorrow, and I'm going to ask him a number of different questions to get him to know him a little better. So mark your calendar, buckle up, it's going to be a lot of fun. Our grocery list for tomorrow's Tuesday hands-on activity is in Google Classroom as well as on the Met's website. And so you can see there's a lot of different things there that we want you to have if you want to do that live or later in the week. The one big thing we've added, there's a couple eagle eyes that have caught this as well. We forgot to add flour, which is a pretty important ingredient. So be sure you have 3 3/4 cups of flour or 450 grams. That'll be really helpful. So again, you can always look at this on Google Classroom, or if you want to watch this video later and just scroll back and pause it just to see this list again, this information is in a lot of different places. And if you have any questions, I don't want you to hesitate to reach out to myself or any of the other counselors or Dan. You can always message me through Google Classroom by creating you can just write me a private message, and as soon as I see that, I will message you back. You can also email me. My email is there on the screen, timothy.brendler@metoperaeducation.org. And this other thing that we would really love for your parents, especially to participate in, is tag us with your pictures on Instagram using @MetOperaStudent and the hashtag #MetOperaCamp. We would love to see your photos as you do a lot of these activities throughout the week. So here's a schedule for you to look over. It's also on Google Classroom, and anything green is for the younger cohort, the blue is for our older friends, and yellow is when we all come together. So tomorrow at 12 noon Eastern time, and there's also a fancy little converter, parents, that if you are joining us from outside of the Eastern time zone, you can use that converter, and that'll tell you exactly what time. And so I actually think we have a good chunk of time to spend together if we have questions or maybe a different activity, or we want to watch the trailer or folk dance. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and Dan is, I'm going to ask Dan to come back inside with us to our platform, and we will...
Hi, Met Opera campers.
See you. There we are. Yes.
Hi, Mr. Tim. What a great lesson. Thank you so much. I learned a ton. This is really, really exciting. Thank you for all of your hard work. Thanks for making this so accessible to so many wonderful students. I love the Mentimeter.com Q&A with everyone.
Yes, that was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Let's see here. What do we have going on? We have a trailer of the Metropolitan Opera production of Hansel and Gretel that we can show everybody to see what a trailer might look like if they're going to create one for themselves. Let's pop that in for everybody. Great. So cool. So it's a little quick thing, right? Anyone can make one. I'd love to see those and feature them in the Camper Showcase next week. It looks like we have a ton of questions piling in here, Tim, and I'm going to back out of the room and I'm going to start asking, or I'll pop the questions into the lower third. Any questions that don't get answered today, you can email us at summercamp@metopera.org right there at the bottom of your screen. And in the meantime, keep having fun. Keep watching opera. We'll see all of you tomorrow for Arts and Crafts with Anthony Roth Costanzo. I can't wait. Great. All right. See you soon, everybody.
Again, friends, we are so excited that you are here with us. This might seem a little overwhelming, but don't worry. We are here to help you throughout the week if you have questions about activities. Oh my gosh, Elisa, I'm so glad that you asked, why is he in a Santa hat? I know it's very strange, and I live in Texas, and it's very hot to be wearing a Santa hat, especially these days in the summer. But the reason why I'm wearing a Santa hat, and I talked about this a little earlier, so especially for our friends who joined us a little bit later, the reason why I had the Santa hat on is because this production actually premiered the eve of Christmas Eve on December 23rd, way back in 1893. And also, this is a production at the Metropolitan Opera in New York City that is very oftentimes done during the holiday seasons. And a lot of other companies from across the world have also started doing that too. So it's a really exciting thing, and something that I'm so glad you asked that. Another sort of thing that I wanted to do throughout this week that you're having all these fun with these activities is think of ways that you can incorporate some holiday traditions in the middle of June, which I think is really fun. And we're going to do one of my favorite holiday traditions is when our family comes together and bake. So we're going to get to bake tomorrow. If you have any holiday traditions, celebrate those this week. Choose a day and take some pictures and share your pictures with us of what you're celebrating this summer. Oh my God, Marian, thank you so much. There are so many activities. Again, we don't want anyone to feel pressured that you have to do all of these activities, but there are certainly plenty out there for you to enjoy, and we encourage you to try as many as possible. What I loved as a summer camper is just trying new things. And so especially if you're thinking, I don't know about that folk dance, I think this is a great opportunity this summer to really give that a try. And you might find out that that's something that you might really love to do. What is the hardest part in Hansel and Gretel? That is a great question that I would love to ask our guest stars. And we're going to have a guest star question and answer with Met Opera stars who have sung in Hansel and Gretel. So we'll have to be sure to ask them about that. For me, something that would be a little tricky is just memorizing it. Anytime in opera, they're on stage for some operas are very long, and it's a lot of music to having to memorize, and they never use a score on stage. And to be an opera star, you got to be a phenomenal singer, a phenomenal actor. There are so many aspects that go into opera. That is such an exciting part. So keep that. I'm going to keep that in the back of my mind, and a question I want to revisit with a few of our artists throughout this week that have participated as well in Hansel and Gretel. What is the Google Classroom code? That is a great question. I do not have that code offhand, but perhaps my colleagues might be able to send you that in the stream, maybe a comment, or maybe email you that code as well. So if you have a question, you can see the banner beneath me. If you could just shoot us an email at summercamp@metopera.org, we will be sure to get you that code so that you can on there and join us in all these activities. Oh my gosh, Lacey, we are so excited too. When my mom told me about this, I said, I'm in. I'm so grateful for that. I'm so glad you said yes. That's always the first step, friends, always saying yes. There's so much excitement. Oh my gosh, me too. Like I said earlier, I barely slept. You would think I actually think it's Christmas Day. It's such an exciting time. And friends, we are really looking forward to such a fun week together. Do you have to do it all? No. And that's a great question. There are so many activities. The reason why we have so many activities is that we want you to just choose which ones that you think fit best for you. And there are actually a few of our friends that have contacted me and said, hey, I'm still in school, but can I still participate? Absolutely. You can do as much or as little as you want. We would love for you to try all these different activities. But if you or your family have a lot of other things going on and you're not able to do, they are not mandatory at all. We want you to do as much or as little as you feel comfortable doing. But something that we would love for you all to just try new things. One of my favorite quotes is from Miss Frizzle. This is a very silly American kid show that says, make mistakes, get messy. She always says, buckle up, everyone, seatbelts, everyone. And I think it's going to be such a fun time this week. Try new things. And really look at those activities and see especially what really stands out to you. Are there activities that really resonate? Meaning, do they really, you sit and you're like, oh my gosh, absolutely, I love that. Do children play and sing at the Met and in Hansel and Gretel in particular? That's such a great question. One of the last pictures that I showed you in the final act, when I was going through the story, in Act 3, at the very end, there's a really amazing scene where a bunch of children, and in this one, the Metropolitan Opera actually has a year-round children's chorus that children from all over can audition to be a part of. And in this opera, there is actually a really big role for the children's chorus that they join in the final scene. You will see the children who actually play the gingerbread children who, once the spell is broken and the witch goes away, we're able to celebrate. The children all come back to life, and they actually have a huge role. And one of my favorite parts is just to see that whole entire scene on that final act where all the children and the parents and Hansel and Gretel are together. So great question. Gosh, I wish I knew about that opportunity as a kid. I would have loved to be on the stage at the Met as well. So when are we baking? Great question. We are baking tomorrow. Tomorrow, Tuesday at 12 o'clock noon Eastern time. That is when we are going to be baking with Anthony. And friends, if you don't know anything about Anthony, that's totally fine. You're going to get to know him really well tomorrow with some of the questions I ask him. And you're going to have so much fun baking with him. And even if you just watch him bake, he is just such a fun person to be around. So tomorrow is when we're going to do that activity. And remember, you can always go back and see these later on. Are you putting that schedule? Absolutely. The schedule is also on Google Classroom already. And so you can scroll down on the very, very first thing. If you're on Google Classroom, try to avoid the stream, which is the first thing that will pop up. It's going to be very overwhelming to look at. So there's the second tab on the right in the middle. We'll say classwork. You're going to hit the classwork button and then scroll down. You'll see the first section is the weekly links. Those are the most important things to get you where you need to be. So each day, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, you click on those and that will give you a link to that. And then directly below that, you will see an activity overview that I've created. And in there is that calendar with the blue, the green, and the yellow that I showed you earlier. You can always, once this is posted, you can always pause the video and go back and look at that and maybe take a screenshot of it as well. But they're all over. There's lots of ways to access it. But yes, that is on Google Classroom as well. Who is the least major character and most major character in Hansel and Gretel? Great question. In this particular opera, I think there are every character on the stage of the Met. I think in any production, really, every character is a major part of that story. And even if they don't have a lot to sing or sometimes a lot to say, there's actually some productions that there's a speaker. Anthony was a part of a production last year, Akhenaten, about the sun god, in which one of the characters was only a speaking role. So someone made their Met debut by never seeing a single word on the Met stage. But all that to say, I think everyone has a major part to play in the production. And in this production, there are actually, if you're wondering who sings maybe the least, there are two characters, the Sandman and the Dew Fairy. The Sandman who puts Hansel and Gretel to sleep, and then the Dew Fairy who wakes them up. They have a very small part, but a very tremendously important part to play in this production. And actually, some of their songs in opera, we call an independent song an aria. And some of their music, some of my favorites. So even though we only get to hear them sing a little bit, they actually play a really tremendous role. And then I think the most major, the people who have the most amount of singing would definitely be Hansel and Gretel, which I think we'll have to ask our opera stars later this week, but I think they're pretty equally matched. I think they both have a very, very large amount. There's not, the one thing that I think is great about this production is that neither Hansel or Gretel is actually going to dominate over the other one. Both of them have a very, very big part. And I think when you see both Hansel and Gretel played by Alice and Christine, I think you're just going to love the relationship and how they show that. So friends, we love your questions. We are so glad you're here. Happy holidays. Think about what fun holiday you're going to celebrate with your family. We're going to do some baking tomorrow. It's going to be so much fun to celebrate that and talk with Anthony. And there's so many activities for us to look at. If you have questions, the link is below. And Dan's going to give us a couple more things before we sign off.
Tim, thank you so much for this wonderful lesson. Thank you to all of our campers for joining us for our first session of the whole summer. We're so happy to be here. We'll see everyone tomorrow. Remember that the entire schedule for the week can be found at metopera.org/global summer camp. You can find the entire schedule for the week there. Tim has also included it in his Google Classroom. We're going to sign off now, everybody, but please email us any questions you might have. And don't forget, if you're using Instagram or any social media, you can tag us at MetOperaStudent and hashtag MetOperaCamp. Okay, everybody, we'll see you tomorrow for Arts and Crafts. Bye-bye.
Bye, friends.
Thanks, Tim.